Her family forced her to marry her sister's millionaire groom in a coma. The twist was shocking. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story and return to our main character. It was supposed to be a wedding filled with music, champagne, and smiles. Instead, the bride stood alone in a hospital room. White roses filled the air with a sweetness that almost hid the smell of antiseptic. Machines beeped steadily beside a man in a coma, her husband-to-be. Lila Hart's fingers trembled as she touched the edge of her veil. 23. Soft-spoken, raised to obey. Today, she was marrying Ethan Cross, the tech millionaire. Her sister was supposed to Wednesday, only Ethan was unconscious, and her sister Vivian had vanished hours before the ceremony. Just sign, Lila, her stepmother whispered sharply. Her red nails glinted under the fluorescent light. If the press finds out Vivian ran away, this family will be ruined. Do you understand? You will save all of us. Save us. Lila swallowed hard, her heart pounding louder than the monitor's beeps. Her father's medical bills waited in a folder at home. Her stepmother's promise echoed. Do this, and we will pay for his surgery. It was madness. Marrying a man who could not even say, I do. But madness sometimes wears the face of mercy. The notary cleared his throat. Miss Hart, please place your signature below Mr. Cross's. He guided her hand to the line beside Ethan's still fingers. His skin was pale, almost translucent, the skin of someone who had not felt sunlight in weeks. For a moment, she imagined him waking, confused, asking who she was. Would he hate her for it? Her pen touched the paper. One stroke, then another. The ink bled into the page like a secret she would never be able to erase. The room fell silent. The only sound, a faint spike on the heart monitor. Everyone froze. The lawyer looked up, startled. It is just interference, the nurse said quickly, adjusting the wires. But Lila's eyes locked on the man in the bed. For the first time since she had entered, his finger twitched. Her breath caught. Did you see that? No one answered. They were too busy packing documents, pretending nothing had happened. Her stepmother pressed a cold kiss to her cheek. Good girl. The cameras will arrive in 10 minutes. Fix your makeup. But Lila could not move. She leaned closer to the bed. Mr. Cross, she whispered, her voice trembling. I am sorry. I did not mean to take her place. I only wanted to help. The air seemed to thicken, as if the room itself was listening. She reached for the nightstand, noticing a framed photo, a younger Ethan, smiling beside Vivian. In the picture, Vivian's hand rested over his heart. Lila's own hand hovered over the same spot now, just inches away from his chest. She swore she felt warmth, or maybe that was her guilt burning through her fingers. Then came the flash. The photographer entered with the family's PR agent, snapping photos of the ceremony. Oh! Each click felt like a gunshot. Mrs. Cross, the agent said, smiling tightly. Could you hold his hand for the picture? Her throat went dry. Still, she obeyed. Her palm rested on his. It was cold, but not lifeless. The faintest pulse pushed against her skin. Tiny, real. Her eyes flickered up, just in time to see the monitor blink faster. Perfect, the agent said. Let us show the world that love conquers all. Lila forced a smile. Cameras flashed again. Outside the window, rain began to fall over Manhattan. Inside, Lila whispered beneath her breath, unheard by everyone but the man who could not answer. I will stay until you wake up, and if you never do, I will still be here. A single drop of rain rolled down the glass, tracing the shape of her reflection, and though no one else noticed, Ethan's hand twitched again. The rain outside Manhattan had not stopped since the wedding. For 3 nights, thunder rolled across the skyline, as if the heavens themselves disapproved of what had happened inside that hospital room. Lila stayed in the mansion Ethan had owned, a place so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat echo between marble walls. Every hallway smelled of wealth and loneliness. Portraits of his family lined the corridor, their eyes following her like silent witnesses to a crime she never meant to commit. She had been given a room across the hall from Ethan's suite. The lawyer said it was temporary, until Mr. Cross awakens or legal matters are concluded. But Lila did not sleep. She could not stop hearing that faint beep-beep of the monitor, or seeing the twitch of his hand. It played in her head like a heartbeat she could not ignore. Every morning, she walked past his door. The nurses changed shifts, the machines hummed, and sunlight filtered through sheer curtains onto his pale face. He looked peaceful, too peaceful for a man once known as the most dynamic CEO in New York. A man who built empires, gave speeches, inspired thousands, and now lay silent, trapped somewhere between life and memory. Lila had read about him before all this. Ethan Kross, founder of Kross Technologies, valued at nearly $2 billion. Charitable, brilliant, ruthless when needed. The kind of man her sister loved to chase. But seeing him like this helpless, human unraveled all the gossip. On the fourth morning, Lila found herself carrying a cup of chamomile tea into his room. "I know you cannot drink it," she whispered, setting it on the table. "But it makes the air smell calmer." She looked around at the sterile equipment, the untouched flowers sent by business partners, and sighed. The loneliness in the room mirrored her own. Her fingers brushed the piano in the corner, a grand Steinway covered in dust. "Do you like music?" she asked the sleeping man softly. "My father used to play Clair de Lune when I was little. It made everything feel lighter. Maybe it will help you too." Her phone's speaker played the first notes. The melody filled the air, delicate, hesitant, almost sacred. The heart monitor ticked in rhythm. Lila smiled faintly. For the first time, she felt she was not talking to a stranger. Days passed. The press released photos of the miracle marriage. Commentators called her selfless. Others called her insane. She ignored them all. She spent her mornings cleaning Ethan's study, her afternoons reading by his bedside. She told him stories about growing up in a small apartment above a bakery, about her father's illness, about the feeling of being invisible next to her glamorous sister. "Vivian shines," she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "People look at her and forget I exist. But maybe that is why I was chosen for this. Because I am the one who stays when others run." Another soft sound came from the monitor. The rhythm changed. Lila leaned forward, afraid to hope. His eyelids fluttered, only for a second. She gasped, standing so fast that the chair scraped the floor. "Doctor," she called out. The nurse rushed in, checked the readings, and frowned. "It could be reflex movement, Mrs. Kross," the nurse said kindly. "Do not raise your expectations." But the nurse did not see what she saw, the briefest tightening of Ethan's fingers, as though he was holding on to something unseen. That night, Lila sat awake, staring out the window as lightning split the clouds. She thought about her father's words before his last surgery. "Kindness is not weakness, Lila. It is courage without armor." Tears stung her eyes. "Maybe this is what courage looks like," she whispered to the empty room. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up to the mansion. Vivian stepped out, flawless as ever, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Her mother followed, holding a folder thick with legal documents. "Darling," her mother began sweetly, "Vivian has decided to come back. The doctors say Ethan's condition may improve, so it is best if we restore the public image." Lila froze. "You mean pretend again?" Her mother smiled coldly. "It is not pretending, dear. It is business." Vivian brushed past her and entered Ethan's room, her perfume replacing the faint scent of chamomile. Cameras clicked from the hallway. Reporters had been invited. The faithful fiancé had returned. Lila watched from the doorway, her throat tight. Vivian posed by the bedside, placing her manicured hand over Ethan's. "He still feels warm," Vivian murmured to the press, perfect tears glimmering on cue. Something inside Lila cracked. She turned away before anyone could see. As she reached the staircase, she heard the piano key she had cleaned days ago, one single note ring out faintly from Ethan's room. No one else noticed. But Lila stopped in her tracks. Her pulse quickened. She knew that sound. She whispered under her breath, "Ethan, was that you?" The thunder outside answered for him, deep and alive. And for the first time, she no longer doubted that somewhere inside that silent body, he was trying to wake up. 2 weeks passed, and the air in the Kross mansion felt heavier with every sunrise. Reporters had stopped coming. The cameras no longer lined the driveway, but the silence that followed was worse. It was the silence of waiting, of pretending everything was fine when the truth was rotting underneath. Lila had learned to move like a shadow. Vivian and her mother had taken over Ethan's house, acting as if it already belonged to them. They hosted luncheons, smiled for photographers, and told everyone that Ethan's recovery was imminent. Yet every night, they locked his room and forbade Lila from entering. But kindness is stubborn. It finds cracks in locked doors. Lila bribed one of the night nurses with homemade bread to tell her how Ethan was doing. "He reacts sometimes," the nurse whispered. "Not much, but when the lights are dim and the music is soft, his heart rate rises, almost like he knows." Lila smiled faintly. "He remembers," she said. That night, when everyone else had gone to bed, she crept upstairs. The key she had secretly copied weeks ago trembled in her hand. She opened the door slowly, careful not to make a sound. The room smelled like antiseptic and loneliness again, but the piano in the corner gleamed faintly under the moonlight. Ethan lay as before, eyes closed, wires tracing his life in soft beeps. She walked to the piano and pressed a single key, Clair de Lune. The melody floated like a secret prayer. "You are still fighting, are you not?" she whispered. "I know it. I can feel it every time I walk by your door." A low sigh escaped from the machine. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Then his hand moved a real movement, small but deliberate. Lila's heart leapt. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Ethan, it is me, Lila." The beeps grew faster. The faintest twitch ran through his lips, as if his body was trying to form a word. The nurse's warning echoed in her head. "Do not get your hopes up." But hope was the only thing that had kept her alive this long. She pressed her palm gently against his hand. "You are not alone, I promise." The next morning, the mansion buzzed with tension. Vivian had seen the piano lid open and immediately accused Lila. "What were you doing in there?" Vivian snapped. "I was checking on him," Lila replied calmly. "You do not even visit unless cameras are watching." "Ali." Her mother stepped between them, voice cold. "Enough. You are no longer needed here. We will send the rest of your father's medical payment. You can leave tonight." Lila stood frozen, the world collapsing in slow motion. "You promised," she whispered. Her mother's smile was thin and merciless. "Promises are just words, dear. Business is what keeps us alive." That evening, she packed her few belongings. Her father had passed quietly 2 nights before. There was nothing left to stay for. She walked down the marble steps, her shoes echoing like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something she could not see. Before leaving, she slipped one final note under Ethan's door. The paper smelled faintly of chamomile and tears. It read, "You do not owe me anything, but if you ever wake up, please remember that someone believed in you when the world only wanted your fortune." Weeks later, sunlight streamed through the windows of Ethan's room. The machines still hummed, but something inside him had changed. His mind floated between dreams and memories, voices blending into each other, images flickering like old film. A girl's voice, soft and uncertain, saying, "I will stay until you wake up." His eyelids twitched. A faint hum of Clair de Lune drifted from the piano. Someone had turned it on again. Maybe the nurse, maybe fate. His hand clenched. The monitor spiked. When he finally opened his eyes, the world was bright and blurry. The nurse gasped, pressing the emergency button. "He is awake!" Doctors rushed in, machines whirring. Ethan blinked slowly, trying to focus. "Where is she?" he murmured, his voice a rasp of memory. "Who, sir?" the doctor asked. "The girl," Ethan whispered. "The one who stayed." They looked at each other, confused. The official record showed only his fiancé, Vivian Cross. "She is outside, sir," the doctor said quickly. "She will be here soon." But when Vivian walked in, Ethan's eyes filled with confusion. Her voice was sharp, too polished, nothing like the one he remembered. "I am here, darling," she said sweetly, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You scared us all." Ethan frowned, his hand instinctively reaching for his nightstand. There, among the cards and flowers, lay a folded note, faintly scented with chamomile. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was small and familiar. "You do not owe me anything. But if you ever wake up..." His chest tightened. A single tear rolled down his temple as he whispered her name for the first time. "Lila." Vivian's smile froze. "What did you say?" But Ethan was no longer looking at her. He was staring out the window, sunlight spilling across his face like a promise. He was alive. And somewhere out there, so was the woman who had given him a reason to wake up. The day Ethan Cross woke up, the news spread across every financial and gossip channel in New York. Tech billionaire awakens from coma after miracle recovery. Headlines flashed on screens. Investors cheered, and Vivian smiled for the cameras like a queen reclaiming her throne. But behind closed doors, the house was not as perfect as the pictures suggested. Ethan's recovery was slow. He could speak, walk short distances, and attend brief meetings, but his mind was still foggy. The doctors said memory loss, after long-term unconsciousness, was common. Except Ethan did not forget everything. He remembered the music. He remembered a voice that spoke softly in the dark. He remembered kindness, not duty. Vivian was patient in public and demanding in private. She brought in stylists, journalists, and luxury dinners. She treated him like a brand to relaunch. But Ethan could not shake the emptiness that lingered after every event. One night, as the guests left and the mansion returned to silence, Ethan found himself in his study. The rain outside mirrored the first night he had met. Lila, at least, he thought he had. The memories came in flashes. A trembling hand, a whisper, a scent of chamomile. He opened the drawer and found a security drive labeled Room C4, Patient Monitoring. His assistant had left it there weeks ago, assuming it contained medical logs. Ethan inserted the drive into his laptop. The screen lit up with static, then images grainy black and white footage from his hospital room. A young woman entered, her hair loose, her movements gentle. She set a cup of tea beside the bed, adjusted his blanket, and spoke words the camera did not record. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding. There she was, the girl in his memories. The footage changed. Her reading a book, turning on music, cleaning the room, whispering goodnight. He saw himself twitch, his fingers moving, his pulse rising. He saw her smile through tears. And then he saw her being pushed aside by two women, Vivian and her mother. The audio cut in for a second. "Get her out before the reporters come," Vivian's mother said coldly. Ethan's blood ran cold. He replayed the clip, again and again. Each time, his jaw tightened, his hands shaking with fury and disbelief. The truth was right there. The person who had cared for him, who had stayed, who had spoken to his soul was not Vivian. It was Lila. The next morning, Ethan confronted Vivian. "Tell me about the girl who was here when I was unconscious," he said, voice calm but dangerous. Vivian blinked innocently. "What girl?" "Do not lie to me," Ethan said. "She left me a note." Vivian's smile faltered. "She was just a caretaker, a charity case. You do not owe her anything." Ethan's eyes darkened. "She is the reason I am alive." Vivian laughed sharply. "You are confused. That girl did nothing but wander around acting saintly. You owe her nothing. You owe me everything." He stood up. "You are right about one thing, Vivian. I owe someone everything, but it is not you." Then he walked out, leaving her speechless. For days, Ethan searched. He used every connection, every resource. No one knew where Lila Hart had gone. Her stepmother claimed she had moved out of state after her father's death. Her phone number was disconnected. Finally, a lead appeared. A community clinic in upstate New York had recently hired a volunteer named Lila. She worked as a nurse's aide, helping elderly patients and families who could not afford care. Ethan drove there himself. No chauffeur, no press. Just him and the road. The town was small, quiet, surrounded by hills turning gold under the afternoon Sunday. The clinic was modest, built from red brick and compassion. Inside, he found her arranging medicine boxes on a shelf. Her hair was tied back, her uniform simple, her eyes focused on the task. She looked different, freer, stronger, but when she turned and saw him standing there, the world seemed to stop. "Ethan?" she whispered. Disbelief and fear tangled in her voice. He took a slow step closer. "You remember me." Her lips trembled. "Of course I do. You woke up." "I did," he said softly, "because of you." The words hung between them, fragile and real. "I saw everything, Lila," he continued. "The footage, the tea, the music. You were there when no one else was." She shook her head. "I did not do it for gratitude. I only wanted you to live." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "That is what makes it mean everything." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded note she had left behind. "I kept this. Every word. I read it the morning I woke up." Her eyes filled with tears. "You were never supposed to see it." "I was supposed to," he said firmly, "because those words brought me back." Silence fell. Outside, children laughed in the distance. Inside, it was just them, two people who had met in a lie and found truth in the quiet moments between life and death. Ethan smiled faintly. There is something I want to show you. It is called the Cross Healing Foundation. It is a project I started yesterday. It will fund free clinics like this one. In your father's name." Lila stared at him, speechless. He took her hand gently. "You once said you would stay until I woke up. Now that I am awake, I am here to stay with you." The piano music of Claire de Lune began playing softly from his phone. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, every wound that had kept them apart finally began to heal. The following week, the world learned the truth, though not in the way Vivian expected. Ethan called a press conference at the headquarters of Cross Technologies. The building's glass facade reflected the morning light, and journalists crowded the lobby, curious about the man who had come back from a coma to reclaim his empire. Vivian stood near the front, perfectly styled, her mother beside her. They believed Ethan would finally announce their engagement again, the one they had planned long before the accident. Instead, Ethan stepped onto the stage alone. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice steady, resonant. "While I was unconscious, I learned something far more valuable than any business lesson. I learned the power of honesty and of kindness, freely given." He paused, scanning the crowd. The cameras clicked. "When I was in the hospital, someone cared for me without expecting anything in return. Someone who reminded me that leadership is not about control, but about compassion." Vivian shifted uneasily. Her smile stiffened. Ethan continued. "That person's name is Lila Hart. She was not a nurse. She was not a business partner. She was simply human. And she is the reason I am standing here today." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Vivian's mother paled. Vivian took a step forward, whispering sharply, "What are you doing?" Ethan turned to her calmly. "Telling the truth, something you and your mother forgot how to do." The audience gasped. Reporters raised their microphones as he added, "There will be an internal investigation into fraudulent representation within this family. The cross name stands for integrity. It will not be used to hide deceit." Vivian's face hardened. "You will regret this," she hissed. Ethan's eyes softened. "No, I have already lived my regret. I am done sleeping through my life." That evening, Lila watched the press conference replay from the clinic's break room. The small television flickered with Ethan's image, his words echoing through the room. Nurses stopped to listen. "He is talking about you," one of them said softly. Lila's hands trembled around the cup of tea she was holding. She had tried to stay quiet, to build a new life away from the chaos of his world. But he had just brought her back into it, not with scandal, but with truth. Her phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Look outside." Confused, she walked to the window. A black car was parked near the gate, rain glistening on the hood. Ethan stood beside it, holding an umbrella. The nurses exchanged delighted looks. "Go," one whispered. "You deserve this." Lila stepped out into the rain, her heart pounding. The moment she reached him, he closed the umbrella and laughed softly. "I did not want to wait another day." "Ethan, you should not have done that," she said. "The press, Vivian." "Let them talk," he interrupted gently. "Let them say whatever they want. I am not here for headlines. I am here for you." The rain soaked through his coat, but he did not care. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring simple, elegant, silver, engraved with 4 tiny words. "For kindness, not duty." Lila gasped. "You kept the engraving from my father's bracelet." "I did," he said, smiling, "because it reminds me who I want to be. Not the man everyone expected, but the one you believed I could become." He knelt down on the wet gravel, raindrops falling like tiny diamonds around them. "Lila Hart, will you marry me truly this time, with no contracts, no lies, no shadows?" Tears blurred her vision. "Ethan, this is crazy," she whispered. He looked up, rain running down his face. "So was the first time. But this time, it is real." Her laugh broke through her tears. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will. All." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand warm and trembling. The clinic's lights glowed behind them, and somewhere inside, Claire de Lune played faintly from the radio, like the universe had been waiting for this moment too. The following spring, the Cross Healing Foundation opened its first free medical center under Lila's direction. The sign out front read, "For kindness, not duty, a gift of healing." Ethan and Lila stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by doctors, patients, and the quiet applause of people who understood what it meant to be seen. "Are you nervous?" she whispered. He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Only a little. But then I look at you, and I remember I already survived the hardest part. The cameras flashed, but this time, the moment was real. No pretense, no performance. Only two people who had found each other in the strangest way and decided to stay not out of duty, but out of choice. And as the ribbon fell and the crowd cheered, Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "You once promised to stay until I woke up. Now, I promise to never let you fall asleep alone again." Okay. The melody of Claire de Lune swelled, blending with the laughter and the sound of new beginnings, proof that even the most unreal love can become real when born from kindness. The months that followed felt like a quiet miracle. The Cross Healing Foundation grew faster than anyone had predicted. Clinics opened in 3 cities, each one offering free treatment to patients who could not afford it. Lila spent her days organizing volunteers, visiting hospitals, and training staff. Ethan managed the funding and technology, often showing up at her side in rolled-up sleeves instead of expensive suits. For the first time, both of them were living without pretending. Their lives were filled with ordinary moments, breakfasts on the porch, late-night paperwork, and shared laughter over spilled coffee. Yet under the peace, there was something deeper taking root. Ethan had changed. The man who once measured success in profit now measured it in smiles and recoveries. When journalists asked why a billionaire would spend millions on charity, he always gave the same answer. Because one person's kindness saved my life. This is how I return it. But peace never lasts long in stories like theirs. One afternoon, as Lila was reviewing patient forms, a letter arrived at the clinic. It was sealed with the Cross family crest. Inside was a lawsuit. Notice Vivian and her mother were demanding compensation for emotional damages and defamation. They accused Ethan of public humiliation, and Lila of manipulating a patient for personal gain. Lila's hands shook as she read it. "Ethan, this is terrible. They will drag everything back into the spotlight." He took the letter, his jaw tightening. "Then let them. We have nothing to hide." Vivian's lawyer held a press conference 2 days later, painting her as the betrayed fiancé and Lila as a scheming imposter. Social media buzzed again, echoing the same cruel rumors that had haunted Lila months before. When Ethan saw her crying alone in the office that night, he knelt beside her. "Do not let their noise rewrite our truth," he said gently. "We know what happened. The world will see it too." She looked up, her voice breaking. "What if it destroys the foundation? Then we will rebuild it," he replied. "We built each other once. We can do it again." The trial lasted 6 exhausting weeks. Reporters packed the courtroom every day, hungry for scandal. Vivian appeared elegant and tearful, rehearsed in her lies. Her mother whispered strategy from the first row, but Ethan came prepared. His team presented the hospital footage, the same one that had once broken his heart, and then restored it. The judge watched as Lila's kindness played across the screen, her placing the cup of tea, wiping the window, whispering to the unconscious man. When Vivian's voice echoed from the recording, "Get her out before the reporters come," the courtroom fell silent. Even Vivian's lawyer looked away. Ethan stood and faced the judge. "That was the moment I realized what love truly is. Not the kind that performs for cameras, but the kind that stays when no one is watching." Lila's eyes filled with tears. She had tried to stay composed, but those words undid her. The verdict came swiftly. The court dismissed all charges. Vivian and her mother were ordered to pay damages for fraud and defamation. The reporters outside captured the moment Lila and Ethan stepped into the sunlight together, their hands clasped, no longer hiding from anything. That night, they returned to the clinic. The staff had decorated the lobby with fairy lights and flowers. A hand-painted sign hung above the doorway. "Welcome home, Mr. and Mrs. Cross." Ethan laughed softly. "They still call us that," Lila smiled. "Maybe because that is who we are now." He took her hand, leading her through the quiet halls. Patients slept peacefully, the scent of chamomile filling the air. In one of the rooms, a child had left a drawing on the wall, a heart surrounded by 2 words. "Thank you." Lila stopped to look at it, tears glistening. "Sometimes, I still cannot believe all of this is real," she whispered. Ethan turned to her. "It became real the moment you walked into that hospital room and chose to stay." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wish things had happened differently?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, because every lie we lived through led me to the only truth that matters." The rain began outside. soft and steady, the same kind of rain that had once fallen the night they first met. Ethan pulled her closer and kissed her forehead. "Do you hear that?" he asked. She smiled. "The rain?" "No," he said quietly. "The sound of peace." Later that evening, before turning off the lights, Lila placed the silver bracelet, now engraved with, "For kindness, not duty," into a glass display case at the clinic entrance. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Dedicated to those who heal not because they must, but because they choose to." As she stepped back, Ethan slipped his arm around her waist. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "This is home," she said softly. And as the rain whispered against the windows and Claire de Lune drifted through the hallways once more, the story that began with a fake marriage ended exactly as it was meant to, with love made real, and two hearts finally at peace. A year later, the Cross Healing Foundation had become a quiet symbol of hope across the country. Reporters who once chased gossip now wrote stories about free medical programs, community kitchens, and young volunteers inspired by Lila and Ethan's work. What had begun as scandal had turned into legacy. On the anniversary of its founding, the clinic held a small celebration. The staff arranged fresh daisies in the garden, patients brought homemade cakes, and children played near the fountain. Lila walked among them, smiling at every familiar face. She wore a simple white dress, the same color she had once worn in that hospital room, but this time, her heart was calm, her smile real. Ethan watched her from the steps, pride glowing in his eyes. When she reached him, he handed her a single envelope. "It is not business this time," he said. "Open it." Inside was a printed email from the State Health Department. The Cross Healing Foundation had been approved to expand nationwide. "They want us to build 10 new centers in the next 2 years, she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. He nodded. "We did it, Lila. Your father's words, for kindness, not duty. They have become our compass." "Oh." She looked up at him, emotion shimmering behind her eyes. "No, Ethan. Our kindness. You turned guilt into purpose. That is what saved us both." They walked together through the garden. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, and the sound of distant laughter echoed through the air. For a moment, the world felt perfectly balanced, pain and healing, loss and renewal, all folded into one quiet peace. Then Ethan stopped. "I have one more thing," he said, smiling like a man about to risk everything again. "Come with me." He led her to the back of the clinic where a new plaque had been covered by a white cloth. Around them, a few staff members gathered, curious. Ethan pulled the cloth away to reveal shining silver letters. "The Lila Crosswing Center for Compassion and Care." Lila's breath caught. "You named it after me?" He nodded. "After the person who taught me what compassion actually means." "Oh," tears welled in her eyes. "I do not deserve that." "You do," he said simply. "Because every life we save here began with yours." The crowd applauded softly. Lila turned toward Ethan, overwhelmed. "You always know how to surprise me," he smiled. "That is because you gave me back the part of myself that believes in surprises." As the sun dipped behind the hills, the lights of the clinic began to glow, warm, steady, alive. Ethan took her hand and whispered, "A year ago, this place was just an idea. Now, it is a heartbeat." Lila looked around at the people, the laughter, the hope. "Then let us keep it beating," she said softly. He drew her close, their silhouettes framed by the fading light. The faint notes of Claire de Lune drifted through the garden once again, weaving their story full circle from duty to love, from silence to song. And when the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Lila whispered, "We did it, Ethan. We turned a lie into something beautiful." He smiled. "No, Lila. You turned it into truth." 6 months later, the Cross Healing Foundation prepared for its biggest milestone, yet the opening of its 10th clinic. This one was different. It stood in the small town where Lila had grown up, built on the same land that once held her father's tiny apartment above a bakery. The past had come full circle. The morning of the ceremony was bright and clear. Volunteers bustled around, setting up chairs and balloons, while reporters gathered near the stage. For once, Lila did not feel nervous about the cameras. She had long stopped seeing them as threats. They were simply witnesses to something good being born. Ethan walked toward her carrying a bouquet of yellow daisies. "Your father loved these," he said softly. Lila smiled. "He did, He said they were ordinary flowers that never stopped trying to reach the Sunday. He handed her the bouquet and added, "Kind of like you." As people took their seats, the local mayor stepped forward to introduce the founders. Ethan went first, speaking about innovation, technology, and the responsibility of wealth. His words were humble, thoughtful, and sincere. Then it was Lila's turn. She stepped up to the microphone, her hands steady. "When I was a little girl," she began, "I used to walk past this street and dream of something small, a place where people could come when they had nowhere else to go. I never imagined it would become this." Her voice softened as she continued. "This clinic is not just about medicine. It is about dignity, about reminding people that they matter. Every patient who walks through our doors is a story waiting to begin again, and we are here to help them believe that they can." The crowd fell silent. A few people wiped tears from their eyes. Ethan stood behind her, his hand resting over his heart, pride shining in his gaze. After the speeches, they cut the ribbon together. Applause erupted, and cameras flashed, but this time, it felt like celebration, not performance. Lila looked around and saw faces she recognized from her childhood: the bakery owner who had once given her free bread, the librarian who had let her sleep between the shelves during hard times. Now they were here, clapping for her, for what she and Ethan had built. When the crowd began to disperse, a little girl approached with a drawing in her hand. "Miss Lila," she said shyly, "I made this for you." It was a crayon sketch of the clinic, surrounded by stick figures with smiling faces. At the top, in big uneven letters, it said, "Kindness wins." Lila knelt down and hugged the girl. "Thank you. That is the best gift I could ever receive." Ethan watched them, his chest tight with emotion. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the silver bracelet, polished, gleaming, engraved with the same words that had started it all. He walked up behind her and fastened it gently around her wrist. "I kept it safe," he whispered. "Now it belongs to you again." Lila looked down, tears filling her eyes. "After everything we went through, this feels like closing a circle." Ethan smiled. "Not closing, Lila, beginning again." The sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the courtyard. Together they stood in front of the clinic, watching as the first patients began to arrive: families, children, elders, all stepping into a place built from faith and second chances. And when the evening breeze carried the faint sound of Clair de Lune from the speakers inside, Lila and Ethan shared a quiet glance that said everything words could not. Their story, once born from lies and loss, had become something pure, a promise that kindness, when chosen freely, could change the world. A full year later, the Cross Healing Foundation celebrated its second anniversary, with a gathering that felt more like a family reunion than a corporate event. The clinics were thriving, and stories of recovery filled every newsletter and social feed. But for Ethan and Lila, the celebration was not about numbers or recognition. It was about remembering how everything had started with a single act of kindness in a cold, silent hospital room. The anniversary gala took place in the same mansion where it had all begun. What was once a place of guilt and pretense had been transformed into the foundation's headquarters. The sterile white halls now glowed with warm light. Portraits of Ethan's ancestors had been replaced by photographs of doctors, nurses, and patients whose lives had changed. As guests mingled and the soft hum of conversation filled the air, Lila stood near the grand piano, the same one she had once cleaned in secret. A bouquet of daisies rested on top of it. Ethan approached quietly behind her, his hands tucked into his pockets. "Do you remember the first time you played that song here?" he asked. Lila smiled. "You mean when I thought you were asleep?" He laughed. "I was listening even then." The band began to play Clair de Lune. The melody drifted through the hall, soft and familiar, wrapping around them like an old friend. Ethan offered his hand. "Dance with me?" She hesitated, glancing at the guests, but he whispered, "Let them see what real beginnings look like." They moved slowly across the marble floor. The world around them blurred the reporters, the donors, the flashing cameras. For a moment, it was only them, just as it had been on that first night when everything felt impossible. As the song ended, applause rose from the crowd. Ethan raised his glass. "To new chances," he said. "To healing, to truth, and to the woman who taught me that love can be both gentle and strong." Lila blushed as everyone cheered, but her heart was too full for words. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, And to the man who proved that kindness is not weakness, it is the beginning of everything. Later that evening, when the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, Lila walked alone into the garden. The night air was cool, and the stars shimmered above the fountain. She could almost hear her father's voice in the wind. For kindness, not duty. Ethan joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "You always come out here at the end," he said. "I like to remember," she answered softly, "where we started, what it cost, and how much it gave back." He nodded. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if you had not signed that paper that day?" Lila smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But then I realize even the mistakes led us home." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a new bracelet, gold this time, engraved with the same words. "For kindness, not duty." "I had it made for you," he said, "to remind us that we built something honest from something broken." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You already remind me every day." They stood together beneath the stars as the music faded inside. The house that had once symbolized deceit now pulsed with life and laughter. The world outside moved on, but here, in the quiet of the garden, everything was at peace. Lila turned toward Ethan, her voice a whisper. "We finally got our happy ending." He smiled, kissing her forehead. "No, Lila, this is not the ending. This is the forever we fought for." "Oh," and as the moonlight reflected off the bracelet on her wrist, the words "for kindness, not duty" gleamed, proof that true love is not born from perfection, but from the courage to choose kindness again and again.